It was one of those perfect spring days, the kind where the sky is a flawless shade of blue and the sun kisses the earth without being too harsh. The city park was alive with laughter, the sounds of children running, parents chatting, and the faint hum of distant traffic. Emma watched her two children as they sprinted across the playground, her lips curving into a gentle smile. She had brought them here countless times, but the joy they experienced was always fresh. Sitting on the park bench, Emma took a deep breath, savoring the moment. The scent of freshly cut grass mixed with the sweet smell of blooming flowers, and the soft breeze played with the tendrils of her hair. Days like these were a rare treasure, a brief escape from the everyday pressures of life. For now, all seemed well in the world. As her children climbed the monkey bars, Emma's gaze wandered across the park. Her attention landed on a young girl, about 7 years old, sitting quietly on a nearby bench with her nanny. The girl held a stuffed toy in her arms, clutching it tightly as if it were her only friend in the world. She was calm, too calm for a child in a park full of excitement. At first, Emma didn't think much of it. Every child had their moments, after all, but something about the girl's demeanor tugged at the back of her mind. While all the other kids were screaming with joy, this girl sat silently, her eyes darting between the playground and the nanny. Emma shook her head, feeling a touch of unease. Maybe she's just shy, Emma thought, dismissing her concern. The nanny, a woman in her early 30s with a friendly face, appeared to be watching the girl closely. Her smile seemed warm, but there was a certain sharpness in her eyes that Emma couldn't quite place. She watched as the nanny spoke to the girl, but the child remained still, not responding. Emma shifted uncomfortably. The park was always a place of joy for her and her children, but today, something felt different. Maybe it was her maternal instinct, or maybe she was overanalyzing a harmless situation. Either way, the image of the silent girl lingered in her thoughts, casting a shadow over an otherwise perfect afternoon. Over the next hour, Emma tried to focus on her own children, but her attention kept drifting back to the girl. It wasn't just the silence that bothered her now. It was the way the girl held herself, so still, so withdrawn. Emma watched as she pressed her stuffed toy against her chest, her small fingers gripping the fabric with an intensity that seemed unnatural for a child her age. The nanny, meanwhile, maintained her cheerful facade, chatting with other adults who passed by. Emma could see the way she interacted with them. Light laughter, polite nods, but every so often, her eyes would flicker back to the girl, like she was monitoring her every move. The girl never spoke, never played, just sat there in silence, her eyes scanning the park with an almost desperate look. Emma's stomach twisted. Was this normal behavior? Maybe the girl was just having a bad day. But the longer she observed, the more her doubt grew. She was a mother herself, after all, and she had seen her fair share of tantrums, shyness, and moodiness. This didn't feel like that. There was something deeper, something that Emma couldn't quite put her finger on. She tried to push the thoughts away. Maybe she was projecting her own anxiety onto the situation. Maybe she was overreacting. She glanced at her own children, their joyful laughter pulling her back to reality, and reminded herself that not every family was the same. But still, she couldn't fully shake the feeling. Then, something happened that made Emma's heart skip a beat. The girl, still clutching her stuffed toy, dropped it onto the ground. Emma's eyes followed the toy as it landed in the dirt next to the bench. The girl looked down at it, her lips parting slightly, her expression one of quiet distress. She leaned forward, about to pick it up, when the nanny's hand shot out, gripping her arm tightly. "No," the nanny said sharply, her voice loud enough for Emma to hear from where she sat. The girl froze, her small hand retreating. She didn't move to pick up the toy again. Instead, she sat back, her eyes downcast, the tension in her tiny body almost palpable from a distance. Emma's pulse quickened. The sharpness in the nanny's voice wasn't the tone of a caretaker scolding a child for misbehaving. It was cold, commanding, and final. It felt wrong, very wrong. Now fully alert, Emma's gaze flickered back to the nanny, who was now chatting again with someone on her phone, her grip on the girl's arm loosening. The nanny looked completely at ease, like nothing had happened. But Emma saw the way the girl's fingers twitched, how she avoided looking at the toy on the ground, how her breathing seemed shallow and quick. Emma's heart thudded in her chest. This was no longer just a mother's passing concern. This felt like a real warning, a situation she couldn't ignore. Her mind raced with thoughts of what to do. Should she confront the nanny? Should she call someone? She wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. Something was very, very wrong. Emma's mind was racing. She couldn't shake the image of that toy lying forgotten in the dirt, the girl's defeated expression after the nanny's sharp command. It was a small thing, a seemingly inconsequential moment in a park full of happy families and laughter. But to Emma, it spoke volumes. Something was off. Her own children were still playing, blissfully unaware of the tension swirling in her mind. Emma glanced at them, reassured by their laughter, but her thoughts immediately snapped back to the girl and the nanny. She needed to be sure. Maybe she was just overthinking this whole situation, but deep down, something gnawed at her, warning her that this was not normal. Emma's heart pounded as she stood up from the bench, trying to appear casual. She told herself she was just going to walk past them, maybe overhear something, or catch another glance that might confirm her suspicions. Her feet carried her slowly in their direction, her eyes pretending to wander the park, but always landing back on the nanny and the girl. As she got closer, she noticed more details. The girl's shoes were scuffed, the soles worn down. Her clothes, while clean, were slightly too big, as if they weren't really hers. The way she sat, so stiff and tense, made Emma's skin prickle with unease. And the nanny was still talking on the phone, her tone casual, but with a certain detachment, as if she were going through the motions of a conversation while keeping one eye on the child. Emma slowed her pace, now only a few feet away. The girl's eyes flickered up to hers for the briefest of moments, and in that instant, Emma saw it, fear. It was subtle, buried deep beneath a surface of composure, but it was there. The girl's fingers twitched slightly in her lap, and for a moment, Emma thought she might reach out for help. But she didn't. She stayed still, frozen in place. Emma's heart sank. This wasn't just an overactive imagination. The girl was in trouble. But what could she do? Her mind raced with possibilities. She could confront the nanny directly. But what if she was wrong? What if this really was just a misunderstanding? But every instinct in her body told her it wasn't. She stopped a few feet from the bench, pretending to look at something in her bag, just to give herself a moment to think. What was her next move? If she caused a scene and was wrong, it could turn into an embarrassing misunderstanding. But she did nothing and something happened to that girl. She would never forgive herself. The nanny glanced up at her, noticing her proximity. For a brief moment, their eyes met. The nanny's expression didn't change, but there was something behind her gaze, calculated, assessing. It was as if she were trying to determine if Emma posed a threat. Emma quickly looked away, her pulse quickening. She couldn't stay here much longer without drawing more attention. She took a step back, deciding that she needed to come up with a better plan. There was no way she could just walk away from this, but she needed to be careful. The wrong move could send the nanny into flight, and then she might never find out what was really going on. As she moved back toward her bench, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered one word: evidence. If she could gather something, anything, that would confirm her suspicions, she could take action without fear of making a mistake. Her phone was in her pocket, and she knew what she had to do. She just needed to be subtle. Emma returned to her bench, her hands trembling as she slid her phone out of her pocket. She tried to calm herself, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. Her children were still playing happily, oblivious to the storm brewing in their mother's mind. She unlocked her phone and opened the camera, positioning it discreetly as she pretended to check her messages. She didn't want to draw attention, but she needed to capture something, anything, that could help. The nanny was still on the phone, talking in hushed tones, and the girl remained quiet, staring blankly at the ground. Emma angled her phone slightly, using the screen to get a clear view of the two. She snapped a few photos, her heart pounding in her chest. From this distance, it might not be enough to prove anything, but it was a start. She took another deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. She knew this couldn't go on for much longer. The longer she waited, the more likely it was that the nanny would leave, taking the girl with her, and Emma would lose her chance to act. But what was her next move? Confronting the nanny head-on still felt too risky, and she didn't want to scare her off before she had enough proof. Emma's mind raced as she considered her options. She could call the police, but what would she tell them? That she had a gut feeling that something was wrong. That wasn't exactly concrete evidence, and she wasn't sure they would take her seriously. She needed more. The idea of following them crossed her mind again. If she could see where they went after the park, maybe that would give her more information. But that felt dangerous, and Emma wasn't sure she was ready to take that kind of risk. What if the nanny noticed her following them? What if she was putting herself in harm's way? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement. The girl had stood up, her small frame trembling as she looked down at the nanny, who was still on the phone. Emma watched as the girl took a small step forward, her eyes darting around the park as if she were looking for something, someone. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Was she trying to signal for help? Before Emma could react, the nanny's hand shot out, grabbing the girl's arm. The girl flinched, her body stiffening as she was pulled back toward the bench. The nanny's voice was sharp now, the friendly tone she had used earlier completely gone. "Sit down," the nanny ordered, her grip on the girl's arm tightening. "We're not leaving yet." Emma's blood ran cold. There was no longer any doubt in her mind. This was not a normal situation. The nanny's behavior, the girl's fear, everything about this screamed danger. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to act now. But how? Emma's mind was a blur of thoughts, her body frozen in place. She knew that whatever she did next would be crucial. There was no time to second-guess herself. She needed to make a decision, and she needed to make it fast. Her phone was still in her hand, and without thinking, she hit the record button. If nothing else, she could capture this moment, this undeniable proof that something was wrong. The video would be her evidence if she had to explain this to the authorities. She stood up, her heart pounding, her mind made up. She was going to follow them. Wherever they went, she would be right behind them. She wouldn't let that girl out of her sight. Emma's breath was shallow as she stood up, her phone still recording in her hand. She wasn't sure exactly how she would confront the nanny, but she knew she couldn't let them leave the park without doing something. As she took her first steps toward them, a flood of thoughts rushed through her mind. What if she was wrong? What if this nanny was simply a strict caregiver? But the grip on the girl's arm and the sharpness in her voice replayed in Emma's head. No, something was definitely wrong. Her steps were slow but deliberate as she approached. She didn't want to alarm the nanny just yet. She needed to appear casual, like any other concerned parent. As she neared them, she could hear snippets of a nanny's conversation on the phone, something about timing and making sure no one notices. Emma's heart thudded louder in her chest. Her throat was dry as she cleared it and spoke. "Hi there," Emma said, her voice friendly but firm, masking her nerves. "I couldn't help but notice your little one dropped her toy earlier. I just wanted to make sure she was all right." The nanny's head whipped around to face her, the phone still pressed to her ear. There was a flash of surprise in her eyes, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by a calm smile. Too calm. "Oh, she's fine," the nanny said, waving dismissively. "She can be a bit shy sometimes. Thank you, though." Her voice was polite, but there was something clipped about it, like she wanted Emma to leave as quickly as possible. Emma's gaze shifted to the girl, who was staring down at the ground, her stuffed toy still lying forgotten in the dirt. Emma knelt down slightly, making herself eye level with the child. "Hey, sweetie," Emma said softly, ignoring the nanny's attempt to brush her off. "Do you want your toy back?" The girl's eyes flickered up for a brief second, meeting Emma's gaze. There it was again, that fear. But this time, it was paired with something else. A silence. Emma could feel it. Before the girl could answer, the nanny stepped forward, placing herself between Emma and the child. "She's fine," the nanny repeated, her tone now edged with impatience. "We really should be going. Come on, honey." Emma's pulse quickened. The nanny was trying to leave, to take the girl with her, and Emma still didn't have enough proof to stop her. Panic rose in her chest. She couldn't let them leave, not without doing something. "Wait," Emma blurted out, her hand instinctively reaching out toward the girl. "Are you sure she's okay?" She seemed scared. The nanny's expression darkened, though she tried to keep the polite mask in place. "I appreciate your concern, but this is none of your business. She's just a little upset today. Kids have their moods, you know how it is." Emma could feel the tension radiating off the nanny, and she knew she was pushing her limits. She needed to be careful, but she also couldn't back down. "I understand," Emma said slowly, "but it seems like more than just a mood. Maybe we should get someone to help, just in case." The nanny's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Emma saw something flicker in them, a mix of anger and fear. She was getting too close to the truth. Without another word, the nanny grabbed the girl's hand and began walking quickly toward the park exit. Emma's heart lurched. This was it. She had to act now. Emma stood frozen for a moment, watching the nanny and the girl walk away. Her brain was screaming at her to follow, but doubt crept in, clouding her judgment. What if she was wrong? What if she was overreacting, and this really was just an overbearing nanny and a shy child? Emma glanced around the park, hoping someone else had seen what she saw, but all the other parents were busy with their own children, completely unaware of the silent drama unfolding before them. She couldn't afford to be wrong. If she made a scene, and it turned out to be a misunderstanding, she could ruin the day for everyone involved, including herself. But if she did nothing, and this girl was truly in danger, how could she live with herself? She took a deep breath and started walking, trying to catch up with the nanny and the girl without drawing too much attention. They were heading toward the parking lot, the nanny walking briskly while the girl trailed behind, her small steps struggling to keep up. Emma glanced around again, hoping to find an ally, someone who could back her up, someone who might have noticed the same strange behavior. She spotted a few parents sitting on nearby benches, watching their children play, but they were too far away and too disconnected from the situation. No one was paying attention. She quickened her pace, closing the gap between her and the nanny. The distance between them grew smaller, and Emma's stomach twisted in knots. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was her last chance. If they made it to the parking lot and drove away, she might never see that little girl again. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out to see a message from her husband, asking how things were going at the park. For a brief moment, she considered telling him everything about the girl, the nanny, the fear that had gripped her. But she hesitated. Would he understand, or would he tell her to leave it alone, to trust that the nanny knew what she was doing? Emma's fingers hovered over the screen, unsure of what to say. In the end, she simply typed, "Everything's fine. Kids are having fun." But it wasn't fine. The girl was now just a few feet away from the parking lot, and the nanny showed no signs of slowing down. Emma swallowed hard, her chest tightening. She had to do something, now. She shoved her phone back into her pocket and hurried forward, her legs shaking as adrenaline surged through her body. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice louder than she intended. The nanny stopped, turning around to face Emma with a look of annoyance. "Yes?" she asked, her voice cold and clipped. Emma's heart pounded in her ears. I just think we should talk to someone," she stammered. "Maybe we should get someone from the park staff to help, just to make sure everything is okay." The nanny's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Emma saw real anger flash across her face. "We don't need help," she snapped. "We're leaving, now." The girl's eyes darted up to Emma again, and for a split second, Emma thought she saw a glimmer of hope in them. But it disappeared just as quickly, replaced by the same fearful, defeated look. Emma's hands clenched into fists. She couldn't let them go. She had to stop this. Somehow. But how? Emma's mind raced as the nanny and the girl started walking again, moving closer to the parking lot. Her hands trembled as she took a step forward, unsure of what to do next. Confronting the nanny again felt dangerous, but letting them leave without trying to stop them felt like an even bigger mistake. She glanced around, hoping someone else would notice her distress, but the park remained oblivious, filled with laughter and chatter, completely disconnected from the tension that now dominated Emma's world. She couldn't just stand there. Emma forced herself to move, walking faster, trying to close the gap between her and the pair. She hadn't fully formed a plan yet, but her instincts told her she needed to act before it was too late. Her children were still playing nearby, but in this moment, all her focus was on the girl and the nanny. Emma's heart pounded as they neared the parking lot. The nanny's pace quickened, almost as if she sensed Emma was following her. The girl, still gripping her stuffed toy, looked back over her shoulder, her eyes wide and scared. It was only a brief glance, but it was enough to send a chill down Emma's spine. She wasn't imagining this. Something was seriously wrong. Just as Emma was about to call out again, a man's voice startled her from behind. "Hey, everything all right?" he asked, his tone casual but curious. Emma spun around to see a tall man, another parent, standing a few feet away. He had a toddler on his shoulders and a concerned look on his face, clearly noticing the urgency in Emma's movements. For a moment, Emma hesitated, unsure if she should involve him. But then she realized she had no choice. If she was going to stop the nanny from leaving, she needed help. "I don't think so," Emma replied, her voice shaky. "I think that little girl might be in trouble. I've been watching them, and something just feels off." The man's expression shifted, his casual curiosity turning into serious concern. He glanced toward the parking lot, where the nanny was now almost at the entrance, and then back at Emma. "Do you need me to come with you?" he asked. Emma nodded, feeling a surge of relief. She didn't have to do this alone anymore. "Please," she said, her voice firming up with determination. "I think we should go after them." Without waiting for a reply, Emma started walking again, this time with a man by her side. The nanny was almost out of sight, but Emma could still see the girl's small figure trailing behind her, and the sight made her stomach churn with anxiety. The man kept pace with Emma, his toddler still perched on his shoulders. "What exactly did you see?" he asked, his voice low but tense. Emma quickly explained everything. The girl's silent distress, the dropped toy, the nanny's cold, controlling behavior. She could hear the doubt in her own voice as she recounted the events, but she pushed through it. She knew what she had seen, and she couldn't ignore it. As they reached the edge of the parking lot, Emma saw the nanny heading toward a dark sedan parked near the exit. Her heart raced. If the nanny got the girl into that car, they might never see her again. She couldn't let that happen. "They're leaving," Emma whispered urgently to the man. "We need to stop them." The man didn't hesitate. He handed his toddler to his wife, who had just walked over, and then hurried with Emma toward the car. The nanny had just opened the back door, and the girl was about to climb inside. "Hey," the man called out, his voice loud and commanding. The nanny froze, turning to face them, her hands still gripping the car door. There was a flicker of fear in her eyes now, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her tone sweet but strained. Emma stepped forward, her pulse racing. "I'm sorry, but I think we should get some help. Your little girl seems really scared, and I just don't feel right letting you leave without talking to someone first." The nanny's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on the girl's arm. "She's fine," she said sharply. "We're leaving now." The man beside Emma stepped closer, his presence imposing. "Maybe we should all wait here for park security," he suggested, his tone firm but calm, "just to be sure everything's all right." For a moment, everything was still. The girl stood frozen, her wide eyes darting between Emma, the man, and the nanny. Emma could feel the tension rising, her heart thudding in her chest as she waited for the nanny's next move. Then suddenly, the nanny's face twisted into a snarl, and she yanked the girl toward the car. "Mind your own business," she snapped. "We're leaving." The man lunged forward, grabbing the car door just as the nanny tried to slam it shut. "No, you're not," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Everything happened so fast. Emma's heart pounded in her ears as the confrontation escalated. The nanny's snarl echoed in the parking lot, and the man beside her held the car door firmly, preventing the nanny from getting away. The girl stood motionless, her small body trembling as she clutched her stuffed toy like a lifeline. Emma quickly pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed the number for park security. She wasn't sure how this was going to play out, but she knew they needed help, and fast. "Hello, I need park security at the main parking lot," Emma said into the phone, her voice tight with urgency. "There's a situation with a child. I think she's in danger." As she spoke, Emma could hear the nanny hissing at the man, trying to pull the car door out of his grip. "Let go," the nanny snapped. "This isn't any of your business." The man stood his ground, refusing to back down. "Not until security gets here," he said firmly. "We're not letting you leave with her until we know everything's all right." The nanny's eyes darted around the parking lot, searching for an escape. Emma could see the panic rising in her expression. This was no longer just a game of words. This was a real, desperate attempt to flee. Emma's phone buzzed in her hand, and she quickly answered the call from security. "We're on our way," the security officer said. "Stay where you are." Relief flooded Emma's chest, but she knew they weren't out of danger yet. The nanny was becoming more frantic by the second, and Emma could see the tension in her body building, like a spring coiled too tight, ready to snap. The girl, still standing beside the car, looked up at Emma with wide, terrified eyes. Emma's heart broke at the sight. She wanted to reach out, to pull the girl into her arms and tell her everything would be okay, but she couldn't risk making a move just yet. The nanny was too volatile, and any sudden action could make things worse. Seconds felt like hours as they waited for security to arrive. The man kept his grip on the car door, preventing the nanny from getting the girl inside, but Emma could see the strain on his face. He couldn't hold her off forever. Then, finally, the sound of footsteps approached, and Emma turned to see two park security officers jogging toward them. Relief washed over her like a wave. "Thank God," she whispered under her breath. The security officers quickly assessed the situation, their eyes narrowing as they took in the scene. The nanny's furious expression, the man holding the car door, the terrified girl standing between them. "Ma'am, what's going on here?" one of the officers asked, stepping forward. The nanny's demeanor shifted instantly. She plastered a fake smile on her face and released her grip on the girl's arm. "Oh, nothing," she said sweetly. "This is just a misunderstanding. These people are overreacting. My little girl is fine, aren't you, honey?" The girl didn't respond. She stood perfectly still, her eyes downcast, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Emma stepped forward, her voice steady but urgent. "I don't think she's fine," she said. "I've been watching them for a while, and the girl is terrified. Something is wrong here." The security officers exchanged glances, clearly taking Emma's words seriously. One of them knelt down beside the girl, speaking softly to her. "Hey, sweetie, are you all right? Do you know this woman?" The girl looked up, her eyes flickering toward the nanny, then back at the security officer. For a moment, Emma feared she would stay silent, too afraid to speak. But then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the girl said, "No." The air in the parking lot seemed to freeze. The nanny's face paled, and Emma felt a jolt of vindication rush through her. She had been right. The girl wasn't safe. The security officers sprang into action. "Ma'am, you're going to need to come with us," one of them said, stepping forward to take the nanny's arm. The nanny recoiled, her face twisting with anger. "You can't do this," she hissed, but it was too late. The officers were already escorting her away, and the girl was finally free. As the security officers led the nanny away, Emma felt her legs weaken. She hadn't realized how much tension had built up inside her until now, when it was starting to release. Her hands still trembled, and her breath came in short bursts, but the knowledge that the girl was now safe brought a wave of relief that nearly overwhelmed her. The girl, still holding her stuffed toy, stood in the same spot, not moving even as the scene unfolded around her. She seemed frozen, unsure of what to do or how to react. Emma's heart ached for her. This little girl had been through so much, far more than any child should ever experience, and now she was just standing there, lost and alone. Emma took a tentative step forward. "Hey, sweetie," she said softly, kneeling down to the girl's level. You're safe now. It's going to be okay." The girl's wide eyes met Emma's, and for the first time, Emma saw a flicker of hope in them. It was small, but it was there, a spark of life that had been buried beneath layers of fear and confusion. The girl hugged her stuffed toy tighter, as if drawing strength from its worn fabric, and slowly, hesitantly, she took a step toward Emma. Emma smiled, her heart swelling with relief. She reached out her hand, offering it to the girl. "Do you want to come sit with me for a bit?" she asked gently. "We can wait for the police together." The girl didn't speak, but she took Emma's hand, her small fingers trembling as they wrapped around Emma's. Emma stood up, guiding her to a nearby bench where they could sit and wait for the authorities to arrive. As they walked, Emma glanced back at the man who had helped her. He gave her a nod of approval, a silent acknowledgement that they had done the right thing. Emma nodded back, grateful for his support. She wasn't sure she could have handled this alone. Once they reached the bench, Emma sat down and pulled the girl gently onto her lap. The girl didn't resist, though her body remained stiff and tense. Emma could feel the weight of her fear, the way it clung to her like a heavy fog, but she also sensed the girl's growing trust. She wasn't alone anymore. Emma's children, who had been playing nearby, finally noticed their mother sitting with the unfamiliar girl. They ran over, their faces full of curiosity. "Mom, who's that?" her son asked, his eyes wide with wonder. Emma smiled at him, her voice calm but firm. "This is a friend," she said simply. "She's had a hard day, so we're going to stay with her until the police come, okay?" Her son nodded, his face serious, and he sat down on the bench beside her. Emma's daughter followed suit, sitting quietly on the other side. For a moment, they were all still, the weight of the situation hanging in the air like a storm cloud. But Emma felt a sense of peace settle over her. The worst was over, and now they just needed to wait for help to arrive. Minutes passed in silence, the only sound the distant hum of traffic and the occasional laugh from children still playing in the park. The tension that had gripped Emma's heart was slowly ebbing away, replaced by a sense of calm she hadn't felt since the moment she first noticed the girl. Then, finally, the sound of sirens broke the quiet, and Emma saw a police car pull up to the edge of the parking lot. Relief washed over her once more. The authorities were here. Everything was going to be okay. The officers approached quickly, their faces stern and focused as they assessed the scene. One of them, a tall woman with kind eyes, knelt down in front of the girl and spoke softly to her. "Hi there," the officer said gently. "My name's Officer Davis. Can you tell me your name?" The girl hesitated, glancing up at Emma for reassurance. Emma gave her a small nod, encouraging her to speak. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "Lily," she said. Officer Davis smiled warmly. "Hi, Lily. You're very brave, you know that. We're going to take care of you now, okay? You're safe with us." Lily didn't respond, but she nodded slightly, clutching her stuffed toy tighter. Emma could see the tears welling up in the girl's eyes, and her heart broke for her. She couldn't imagine what this child had gone through, but she was glad that Lily was finally safe. As Officer Davis gently guided Lily to the police car, another officer approached Emma. "Ma'am, can you tell us what happened here?" he asked, his voice professional but kind. Emma recounted everything: the girl's strange behavior, the nanny's controlling actions, and the confrontation in the parking lot. As she spoke, she felt the weight of the day pressing down on her, but there was also a sense of validation. She had done the right thing. She had trusted her instincts, and now this little girl was safe because of it. The officer nodded as he took notes. "You did the right thing by calling us," he said. "We'll make sure she's taken care of." Emma smiled weakly, exhaustion settling in. "Thank you," she said softly. I couldn't ignore it. I knew something was wrong." The officer gave her a reassuring nod before heading back to the squad car. Emma watched as they carefully loaded Lily into the back seat, her heart aching for the girl. She hoped, more than anything, that Lily would be okay, that this traumatic day would eventually become a distant memory, overshadowed by the love and care she would receive from here on out. As the police cars pulled away, Emma sat on the bench, her children still by her side. She let out a long breath, her body finally relaxing as the tension melted away. The park, once again, seemed peaceful. But Emma knew she would never forget this day. The day she trusted her instincts and saved a life. The relief Emma felt was brief. Even though Lily was safe for now, the day had shaken her to her core. The thought of what could have happened if she hadn't followed her instincts sent chills down her spine. As her children played once more in the park, Emma stayed seated, staring at the spot where Lily had stood only moments ago. The memory of her wide, fearful eyes still haunted her. She knew she should feel proud. She had acted when no one else did, but the lingering anxiety wouldn't let go of her. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right. The nanny had been arrested, but who was she working for? How did Lily end up in her care? There were too many unanswered questions. Her phone buzzed in her hand, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was her husband. Emma hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure how to explain everything that had happened. "Hey, how's the park?" his familiar voice asked, cheerful and unaware of the ordeal she had just been through. Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself. It's been a day," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'll tell you everything when we get home." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Are you okay?" her husband asked, concern creeping into his voice. Emma smiled weakly, though she knew he couldn't see it. "Yeah, I'm okay. It's just been intense." "Do you want me to come get you and the kids?" he asked. Emma glanced at her children, who were still laughing and playing as if nothing had happened. She didn't want to cut their day short just because of what she had experienced. They deserved to enjoy the rest of their time in the park, especially since they had been oblivious to the drama. "No, it's all right," Emma said softly. "We'll stay a little longer. I think I need to process everything anyway." Her husband sighed on the other end of the line, but he didn't push her. "Okay, just let me know if you need anything." "I will," Emma promised before hanging up. As she put her phone away, Emma felt a shadow of doubt creep back in. The police had taken the nanny, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Lily's fear hadn't just been about the nanny. There had been something deeper, something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Emma's thoughts were interrupted by a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see the man who had helped her earlier, standing with his wife and toddler. "Hey," he said, his expression serious. "I just wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" Emma offered a small smile. "I'm all right. Thank you so much for helping me back there. I don't think I could have done it alone." The man waved her off, but his expression softened. "You did most of the heavy lifting. I just followed your lead." Emma's smile grew a little. "Well, I'm glad you were there. It was a lot to deal with." The man nodded. "I get that. I just hope the police can get to the bottom of it." Emma's chest tightened again. That was exactly what had been bothering her. Do you think there's more to it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man frowned, glancing over at the parking lot where the police cars had been. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I've got a bad feeling about it. People don't act like that unless they've got something to hide." Emma nodded, her mind swirling with possibilities. The nanny had been controlling, yes, but there had been something desperate about her too, like she knew she was running out of time. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there were others involved, that this was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. As Emma walked slowly back toward the park bench, her children running ahead, she couldn't shake the thoughts racing through her mind. The relief she had felt after the police took the nanny away was quickly being replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. The questions she had asked herself earlier refused to be silenced. What had really happened to Lily? And who was behind it? The sun had begun to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the park. The once vibrant and bustling playground now felt strangely empty, as though the day's events had drained the life from it. Emma sat down on the bench, her mind swirling with a mix of emotions, relief, anxiety, and a lingering sense of dread. She had acted on her instincts, and that had saved Lily. But what if there were other children in danger, children she hadn't noticed? What if this was part of something bigger, something far beyond a single nanny and one scared little girl? The man who had helped earlier approached again, his toddler now happily asleep in his wife's arms. He sat down next to Emma, giving her a knowing look. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" Emma nodded, running a hand through her hair. "I can't stop," she admitted. "It just doesn't feel over. I keep thinking, what if she wasn't working alone? What if there are other kids out there?" The man sighed deeply, his eyes scanning the now empty park. "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. Something about the way she reacted. It felt desperate, like she was more afraid of someone else than of getting caught." Emma had felt that too. The nanny had seemed more scared of failing than of being caught in the act. It was almost as if she knew the consequences of being stopped were far worse than simply being arrested. But if that was the case, who was pulling the strings? "I don't know if we'll ever get the full story," the man continued. "But you did the right thing today. You saved that little girl's life." Emma nodded slowly, trying to let his words sink in. She had done something good. She had followed her instincts, and it had paid off. But that didn't erase the fear that this was just the beginning of something much larger. "I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the police find," Emma said, though the uncertainty in her voice was clear. The man nodded in agreement. "Yeah, but I think it's safe to say that whatever they uncover, it's going to be bigger than we thought." The two sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the day's events settling over them like a heavy blanket. Emma's mind kept drifting back to Lily's face. The wide, terrified eyes, the way she clutched her stuffed toy like it was her only source of comfort. The image haunted her. Just then, her phone buzzed again. It was a text from her husband. "How's everything going? Do you want me to come get you?" Emma quickly typed a response. "We'll be home soon. I'll explain everything when I get there." She hesitated for a moment, then added, "But I think I need a little more time here." She wasn't ready to leave just yet. The events of the day had left her feeling emotionally drained, and she needed a moment to reflect before returning to her normal life. She had been through something extraordinary, something that had changed her. And even though she had been right to act, there was still a sense of unfinished business hanging in the air. The man stood up, cradling his sleeping child in his arms. "We should get going," he said, nodding toward his wife. "But if you ever need to talk, or if anything comes up, let me know. We're all in this together now, in a way." Emma offered a grateful smile. "Thank you. I'll keep that in mind." As the man and his family walked away, Emma sat alone on the bench, her children still playing in the distance. The sky had darkened considerably now, and the once crowded park had emptied out. A cool breeze swept through, rustling the leaves in the trees, and for a brief moment, Emma closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the park wash over her. The questions were still there, hovering at the edge of her mind. But for now, Emma allowed herself a moment of peace. She had done what she could. She had stepped in when no one else would. And for today, that was enough. The next morning, Emma woke to the soft glow of early sunlight filtering through the curtains. She lay in bed for a few moments, letting the calmness of the morning settle over her. But even in the quiet of her home, the weight of yesterday's events lingered in the back of her mind. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it, her heart quickening as she saw a text message from an unknown number. When she opened it, she realized it was from one of the police officers she had spoken to the previous day. "Good morning, Mrs. Parker. Just wanted to inform you that the investigation is ongoing. We've learned some concerning details about the woman you encountered yesterday. There's more to the story than we initially thought, but I can't disclose too much right now. We will keep you updated as we learn more. Thank you again for your vigilance." You did the right thing. Emma's heart sank. She had known it wasn't over. The nanny wasn't just some overbearing caregiver. There was something deeper, something more dangerous at play. The police had confirmed her worst fears, even though they couldn't share the full details yet. She sat up in bed, her mind swirling with questions. What exactly had they uncovered? Was it a child trafficking ring? How many other children were involved? And most importantly, was Lily safe now? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside her bedroom door. A moment later, her children burst into the room, their faces full of energy and excitement. They leapt onto the bed, giggling as they pulled the covers away from her. For a moment, Emma's worries faded as she embraced her kids. their laughter a temporary reprieve from the weight of the unknown. But as they ran out of the room to get ready for breakfast, Emma felt the tension return. She couldn't just sit back and wait for the police to solve everything. She needed to stay involved, to make sure that the investigation continued and that justice was served. She had been the one to intervene, and now she felt a responsibility to see it through. She dressed quickly, her mind already racing with plans. She would contact the police later in the day, offer any further help she could provide. Maybe she could speak with someone higher up in the investigation, press for more details. She had been right to trust her instincts before, and now those instincts were telling her that this was far from over. Later that afternoon, Emma sat down at her kitchen table, her phone in hand. She opened a new email and began drafting a message to the lead investigator on the case. She kept it simple, but firm. I'm willing to assist in any way I can. Please keep me informed of any developments, especially regarding Lily's safety. She sent the email, feeling a small sense of relief. It wasn't much, but it was a step towards staying involved. She couldn't just let this fade into the background of her life. Not after what she had seen. As the day wore on, Emma found herself thinking more and more about Lily. She wondered where the girl was now, if she was with the authorities being cared for, or if she had been reunited with her family. The thought of Lily's wide, scared eyes haunted her, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this little girl's story wasn't over yet. That night, as she lay in bed once more, Emma stared at the ceiling, her thoughts a whirlwind of possibilities. She knew the investigation would take time, and there were no guarantees that all the answers would come soon. But she also knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this go. She had been drawn into something much larger than she had expected, and now she was a part of it, whether she wanted to be or not. The next time her phone buzzed with a message from the police, Emma would be ready. Ready to help, ready to push for the truth, and ready to ensure that no more children like Lily would have to endure what she had seen that day in the park. For now, Emma closed her eyes, letting sleep finally take her. But in the back of her mind, she knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Did you enjoy this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like so you don't miss out on any new content. Every interaction helps the channel grow and brings more stories like this to you. Now, I'd love to know, what part of a story had the most impact on you? Was it the tension, the way Emma trusted her instincts, Lily's fear, or the dramatic confrontation with the nanny? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. And if you have ideas for stories you'd like to see on the channel, drop your suggestions in the comments. Whether it's suspense, mystery, drama, or any other theme, we want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and being part of this community. See you in the next video.